They don't come back because they still exist. They come back because parts of you are still living there. People from the past don't haunt your thoughts because of nostalgia. They haunt you because something was left unfinished. A sentence never spoken. A boundary never set. A humiliation swallowed. Affection given too freely. The brain doesn't chase memories for comfort. It chases unfinished business. And as long as something remains unresolved, the mind refuses to close the file. You can be working, talking, smiling. On the outside, life moves forward. On the inside, the same scene replays without asking permission. That's not weakness. That's biology. The human mind evolved to prevent future losses, and it does that by revisiting past ones until it finds a conclusion it can accept. When that conclusion never comes, repetition turns into silent torture. Here's what no one tells you. The past only gains power when you try to be too polite with yourself. You moved on too fast. You forgave too early. You performed maturity while you were still bleeding. And your brain registered that as internal abandonment. It learned, this was dangerous, this hurt, and no one defended me. So it returns again and again, not to hurt you, but to protect you from repeating the same mistake. Here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not the person that haunts you. It's who you were when you accepted less than you deserved. The memory isn't about them. It's about the boundary you didn't hold, the identity you betrayed to keep the peace, the price you paid to avoid rejection. If this kind of conversation resonates with you, don't treat it as entertainment. Treat it as commitment. Subscribing to this channel is a small but symbolic act, a signal that you're done pushing uncomfortable truths under the rug. Growth begins the moment you stop running from your own thoughts. The real shock isn't that the past hurts. It's realizing it still governs decisions you believe are rational. And until that's seen clearly, nothing truly changes. The brain was never designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you safe. That's the root most people refuse to accept. When something from the past wounds you deeply, the nervous system doesn't store it as a normal memory. It stores it as a threat. Intense emotions activate primitive survival circuits. That's why some memories don't age. They don't belong to time. They belong to alarm. There's a silent mechanism at work. The brain revisits scenes, rewrites conversations, simulates responses you never gave, not because it believes the past can change, but because it wants to build a defense map. The problem starts when that map never completes. That happens when you haven't understood your role, not in terms of blame, but responsibility. As long as the story is, this was done to me, the mind keeps searching for the missing variable, the exact moment you lost yourself. Neuroscience calls this rumination loops. Eastern philosophy calls it attachment to the wounded self. Different languages, same phenomenon. When identity fractures, the mind seeks coherence. It needs to know who you are after that moment. If you don't define it, the mind insists. That's why people stay busy, productive, outwardly resolved, yet internally exhausted. They confused silence with healing. The body moved on. The mind stayed at the impact point. And here's the detail most people miss. Avoidance doesn't erase memory. Avoidance amplifies it. Avoidance tells the nervous system, this is too big for me. So the brain keeps the memory active, accessible, urgent. You're not failing to forget. You're failing to integrate. And integration demands something most people avoid their entire lives. Admitting that the version of you back then didn't know how to protect itself. Until that's faced precisely, the past keeps returning, not as memory, but as warning. Ignored warnings become obsessions. There's a hidden cost to leaving this unresolved. And it doesn't arrive all at once. It infiltrates. When the past stays active, it starts making decisions for you. You call it intuition, but often it's fear in sophisticated clothing. You avoid deep connections, not because you chose wisdom, but because closeness once came with pain. You control too much, give too much, or distance too much. Always extremes. Balance disappears. The most dangerous part. This becomes personality. People say you're cold, or intense, or independent, or guarded. And you start believing them. But those aren't traits. They're adaptations. Survival strategies that were never retired. Over time, the mind stops revisiting just that one person. It generalizes. Neutral situations trigger old reactions. A tone of voice, a delayed reply, an ambiguous look. The body reacts before thought catches up. And suddenly you're trapped in internal dialogues that don't belong to the present. Here's the alarming discovery. Unresolved past experiences don't stay contained. They spread. They shape career decisions, relationship patterns, self-worth, risk tolerance. You stop choosing what you desire and start choosing what feels emotionally safer. The price is subtle but devastating. Life shrinks. Less spontaneity, less aliveness. You call it maturity, but it's contraction. The soul walks on tiptoe to avoid waking old pain. And the longer this lasts, the harder it becomes to trace the origin. The feeling remains, but the cause dissolves. At that point, you stop seeking healing and start seeking distraction. Work, information, noise, anything but silence. But silence always wins. And when it arrives, the past speaks louder than ever. At some point, the mind splits into two opposing forces. One side wants control, productivity, forward motion. The other demands recognition, truth, and repair. This is where escalation happens. You try discipline. You decide not to think about it anymore. You impose logic. This is over. I've moved on. I'm stronger now. But discipline without integration becomes repression. And repression doesn't erase, it mutates. So the past returns in disguise. Irritability without reason. Mental fatigue on easy days. Emotional reactions that don't match the moment. You don't understand why, so you tighten control even more. Here lies the core conflict. Immediate comfort versus internal truth. It's more comfortable to believe you're fine. More uncomfortable to admit something still hurts. The brain hates incoherence. When behavior says, I'm fine, but the body says otherwise, vigilance increases. Thoughts intensify. Memories persist. Sensations sharpen. Not sabotage, alignment attempts. Many people get lost here. They confuse emotional silence with growth. But forced silence creates tension, and chronic tension creates erosion. You harden or collapse. No middle ground. Comfort becomes the trap. Comfort in avoiding hard conversations. Comfort in preserving the image of being over it. Each time you choose comfort, the nervous system learns. Truth is dangerous. And the past receives the message. It's not safe to leave yet. Resolution doesn't require forgetting anyone. It requires reclaiming yourself. The past loses power when you stop fighting the memory and start extracting its message. Not the story, the lesson. Every recurring memory carries a question unanswered. Where did I abandon myself? Where did I silence my truth? Where did I trade boundaries for belonging? The exit isn't reliving pain. It's updating identity. Eastern philosophy has always been clear. Suffering is attachment to an outdated self. You're not stuck on the person. You're stuck on who you were when it happened. Until that identity updates, the mind keeps the alarm on. The method is simple, but demands radical honesty. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" That question keeps you small. You ask instead, "Who must I become after this that I still haven't become?" That shift closes the loop. When you consciously name the missing boundary, the swallowed truth, the posture you now hold, something settles. Not magic. Integration. The nervous system understands. There is defense now. There is clarity. There is presence. And then something changes. The memory may return, but without charge, without urgency, without poison. The past finally leaves because it no longer needs to scream. If you've stayed until the end, write integration in the comments. That's the password, not for the algorithm, for you. A quiet signal that this time you didn't run. The past loses power when you fully inhabit the present. And that's where the mind finally rests.